With a defense budget now absorbing roughly a quarter of Ukraine's entire economy and a mobilized force of well over 2 million citizens in uniform and reserve, just how powerful is Ukraine's military in 2026? Having transformed from a post-Soviet military into one of NATO's most combat-experienced partners, Ukraine has proven itself to be Europe's shield against aggression. But with ongoing threats from Russia and the emergence of new, innovative warfare tactics from drone swarms to electronic warfare, Ukraine must constantly evolve its defensive capabilities, especially while defending a roughly 2,300-kilometer front line and rebuilding liberated territories at the same time. Join us as we delve into the remarkable transformation and hard-won expertise of the armed forces of Ukraine. Over the past 4 years, Ukraine has revolutionized modern warfare through innovative tactics, integrating Western weapon systems, and developing indigenous capabilities that redefine 21st century combat. Necessity drove this transformation, a necessity to defeat a numerically superior adversary while protecting democratic values and territorial integrity, not only in conventional warfare, but also in the drone and electronic warfare realms, where tomorrow's battles are being pioneered today. In 2022, Russia's full-scale invasion forced a rapid shift from Soviet-era doctrines to NATO-standard mission command operations, marking a critical inflection point. Ukraine set a clear goal: build a resilient, technologically advanced force capable of defeating aggression while serving as a live laboratory for Western military innovation. Once upstate and not sate CAIM, hopsay AIIM, Ukraine responded by creating the world's first fully fledged unmanned systems forces as a separate branch of its armed services in 2023-2024. Consolidating drone units under one command. Leaders set ambitious plans to mass-produce FPV and long-range drones at industrial scale, while AI-powered targeting systems dramatically increased first-strike accuracy across the front. The Army of Drones Doctrine democratizes warfare, turning every platoon and increasingly every individual soldier into a precision strike capability guided by live video and digital targeting grids. Ukraine's defense industry and security services shaped a new kind of deep strike warfare with families of domestically developed long-range cruise and strike missiles, building on coastal defense projects to threaten high-value targets far behind enemy lines. Domestic armor and artillery lines shifted to NATO-standard calibers and modular designs, allowing Ukrainian engineers to pair Western ammunition with home-built platforms and rapidly repair battle-damaged vehicles. Most importantly, Ukraine built entire operational concepts around drones, electronic warfare, and digitized command networks, turning the country into the world's leading testbed for unmanned combined arms warfare. Major technological breakthroughs now reach operational status across Ukraine's front lines. The two S-22 Bohdana 155mm self-propelled Howitzer features automated loading, firing roughly 4 to 6 rounds per minute, and hits targets at about 42 kilometers with standard shells and up to 50-60 kilometers with rocket-assisted projectiles, giving Ukraine a NATO-standard gun built to its own combat experience. Early experimental uncrewed surface craft laid the groundwork for the naval drone fleets that would later dominate the Black Sea, demonstrating how low-profile, remotely operated vessels could slip past traditional defenses and strike high-value targets. At the same time, Ukrainian engineers and signals officers pushed toward more resilient, higher bandwidth and increasingly quantum-resistant communication concepts to secure networks against Russia's expanding cyber-electronic arsenal. Ukraine pairs these technologies with agile doctrine. Commanders at every level exploit drone feeds, artillery data, and EW insights in near real time, collapsing the gap between sensor and shooter. Ukraine's strength, however, goes far beyond hardware. The General Staff and Joint Headquarters continuously adapt doctrine based on live combat data, processing information from thousands of reconnaissance drones, frontline reports, and intelligence feeds every day to maintain an unprecedented level of situational awareness. A rapidly growing defense industrial sector combining state conglomerates, private firms, and startups supports this transformation, proving that innovation under fire can outpace peacetime development cycles. As a result, NATO increasingly views Ukraine's military as its most combat-tested partner force, fielding battle-hardened professionals, tactics validated in real combat, and capabilities that are redefining modern warfare. Fast forward to 2026, and the Ukrainian military stands as an unprecedented example of wartime transformation. Recent assessments indicate that Ukraine fields roughly 900,000 active duty personnel across the armed forces, National Guard, Border Guard, and other security structures, plus around 1.2 million trained reservists cycling through frontline and rear area rotations. This force represents national resilience on a scale unseen in Europe since the mid-20th century. The combined security and defense budget for 2025-2026 commits approximately 26 and 27% of Ukraine's GDP to defense and security, with around 2.8 trillion hryvnias, on the order of $45-66 billion earmarked for the armed forces, security services, and defense production. International financial aid requirements remain vast, with planning documents indicating a need for more than $49 billion in external financing in 2026 to sustain both defense and core state functions under wartime conditions. When you factor in foreign military aid, domestic volunteer campaigns, and crowd-funded equipment, total defense-related resources dominate Ukraine's wartime economy, producing history's fastest large-scale military buildup under active combat. National unity around defending sovereignty sustains an innovation tempo that many traditional military powers struggle to match. A citizen-soldier model turns Ukraine into a nation in arms, where civilian expertise in IT, engineering, logistics, and manufacturing flows directly into frontline combat units and support formations. The Ukrainian ground forces field an estimated 450,000 active personnel, organized into brigades that have become legendary across the front. Assault, mechanized, and air-mobile brigades shoulder the bulk of positional fighting, counterattacks, and localized offensives, often rotating from some of the most intense combat zones on the planet. Key equipment includes more than 800-900 main battle tanks, ranging from upgraded T-64BV and T-72 variants to NATO's top designs, including Leopard 2S and a smaller contingent of Challenger 2S and other donated Western types. Ukrainian engineers integrate domestic explosive reactive armor and ad hoc active protection concepts, hardening these vehicles for survival in the world's most drone-dense, artillery-saturated battlefield. The Army fields over 4,000 armored vehicles in total, from M2 Bradley IFVs wrapped in anti-drone cages to Strykers, CV-90S, and homegrown designs built specifically to survive loitering munitions and FPV strikes. Artillery remains king, and Ukraine has learned to master it. The ground forces operate a mixed arsenal of more than 1,000 self-propelled and towed guns, including Western 155mm systems, such as Caesar, Crab, PZH-2000, and indigenous Bohdana, alongside Soviet-caliber guns dispersed along the front. Hundreds of multiple launch rocket systems, Grad, Uragan, Smerch, HIMARS, and upgraded domestic variants, deliver precision strikes, with HIMARS and similar platforms becoming global symbols of long-range accuracy in 2022-2024. Within these ground forces, Ukraine's special operations units represent a decisive asymmetric edge elite formations that turn tactical opportunities into strategic shocks for the enemy. Alpha Group operators, selected from battle-tested veterans, conduct deep reconnaissance and direct action raids far behind enemy lines. The Kraken Regiment, born from volunteer defenders, has become synonymous with rapid, hard-hitting urban assault operations that shape entire sectors of the front. Special Operations Forces, brigades operate along the whole contact line and beyond, while GUR, special units, execute strategic strikes in occupied territories and inside Russia itself, from sabotaged railways to destroyed oil depots. These special operators pack more intense, high-end combat experience into a few years than many Western units see in a generation. Western night vision systems, suppressed weapons, encrypted comms, and Ukrainian-built jammers and counter-drone kits all amplify their ability to dominate the night and exploit fleeting gaps in Russian defenses. SOF teams typically operate under the umbrella of dense ISR, provided by drones and human sources, turning every raid into both a tactical strike and an intelligence-gathering operation that feeds back into Ukraine's broader campaign. Despite severe wartime losses to its legacy fleet, the Ukrainian Navy reinvented itself as a master of asymmetric maritime warfare. Naval crews now focus on unmanned surface vessels, coastal defense missiles, and dispersed shore batteries to contest sea control in the Black Sea. Sea Baby naval drones sit at the center of this transformation. Ukraine's security service and Navy unveiled upgraded Sea Baby variants that can operate at distances of over 1,000, 500 kilometers, with payloads of up to 2,000 kilograms, roughly 2 tons of explosives plus sensors or modular weapon systems. These drones mount not only massive warheads but also remote-controlled machine guns and Grad-type rocket launchers, giving Ukraine unmanned boats that can stalk ships, attack coastal infrastructure, and disrupt amphibious operations. Sea Baby drones and other USVs have struck at least 11 Russian vessels and enabled high-profile attacks on the Crimean Bridge and offshore platforms, forcing much of Russia's Black Sea Fleet to retreat from Sevastopol to safer ports like Novorossiysk. Neptune coastal defense and land attack missiles complement these drones as a strategic deterrent, with newer long-range variants striking Russian targets far inland while mobile launchers constantly relocate to evade counter-battery fire. Riverine forces patrol key waterways with armored boats and improvised craft, keeping supply lines open under fire, while marine infantry continues amphibious and littoral raids along rivers, estuaries, and coastal zones, elite raiders turning every shoreline into contested terrain. Ukraine's Air Force defied early predictions of collapse. Pilots operate from dispersed highway strips, concealed shelters, and improvised forward fields, sustaining a persistent air denial posture along much of the front. F-16 Fighting Falcons delivered from donors such as the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Belgium now enter Ukrainian service in growing numbers, with pledges totaling around 65 aircraft. These multi-role jets integrate NATO standard missiles and precision weapons, binding Ukraine's air power more tightly than ever to Allied doctrine and logistics. Legacy airframes, MiG-29S, Su-27S, Su-24S, and Su-25S receive Western avionics, navigation gear, and weapons, enabling them to launch standoff munitions from safer distances while still delivering punishing blows. Most remarkably, Ukraine's integrated air defense network achieves interception rates often exceeding 80–90% against many missile and drone salvos, while individual systems such as Patriot, NASAMS, and IRIS-T regularly record near-perfect runs against certain threats. Layered networks of Soviet and Western SAMs, combined with mobile short-range units and powerful EW, create a constantly shifting defensive umbrella over cities, power plants, and forward troops. Transport aviation, although heavily tasked and limited in fleet size, continues to fly critical missions under threat to move units, evacuate wounded, and deliver essential supplies to hard-to-reach sectors. Thousands of reconnaissance drones from palm-sized quadcopters to Mail-class UAVs provide persistent ISR, feeding target coordinates into artillery, rocket, and drone strike cells across the country. On the battlefield, unmanned systems operators have changed warfare forever. They command everything from micro-quadcopters used at trench level to strategic-range strike UAVs that roam hundreds or even more than 1,000 kilometers into enemy airspace. Affordable FPV drones, many costing just a few $100s, routinely destroy tanks, howitzers, and sophisticated air defense systems worth millions, turning classic cost exchange logic on its head. Reconnaissance UAVs provide real-time targeting with minimal latency, while strike drones deliver precision payloads up to roughly 1,700 kilometers away, reaching oil refineries, radar sites, and logistics hubs as far as the Russian Arctic and near the Urals. Long-range kamikaze drones and stealthier platforms now conduct record-setting deep strike missions, with most of their true capabilities remaining classified and revealed only through the devastation they leave behind. When Russian forces attempt to jam or hijack these drones, Ukrainian developers respond with rapid software and hardware updates, frequency hopping radios, autonomous navigation modes, AI-assisted route planning, and complex multi-drone swarms that saturate defenses. The National Guard complements these capabilities by protecting critical infrastructure and lines of communication, often acting as the first organized force to meet enemy breakthrough attempts while operating SHORAD systems, engineering assets, and fortified checkpoints. Asymmetric warfare turns Ukraine's disadvantages into strengths. Dispersed factories now produce guided munitions, naval drones, and FPV airframes across the country. Engineers convert civilian boats, quadcopters, and vehicles into lethal strike platforms. And volunteers assemble components in distributed workshops that occupation forces struggle to locate. This ecosystem guarantees that conventional superiority always faces a creative, adaptive threat. Hundreds of thousands of global volunteers power the IT army of Ukraine, launching DDoS campaigns, hacking logistics networks, and vandalizing propaganda channels from homes and offices worldwide. These cyber warriors have already forced Russian websites offline, disrupted media outlets, and targeted logistics platforms, achieving asymmetric effects through keystrokes rather than shells. Electronic warfare systems, led by the nationwide Pokrova network, protect friendly forces by detecting, jamming, and most importantly, spoofing enemy navigation systems. Pokrova replaces satellite signals with false coordinates, tricking Shad drones and similar weapons into drifting off target or even crashing intact far from their intended aim points. Ukrainian and Western reports credit Pokrova and related systems with diverting or neutralizing scores of drones without firing a single missile. The Delta battlefield management system accelerates decision-making, as tablets and laptops at the front process drone feeds, sensor data, and intelligence inputs, while algorithms support targeting and tactical planning in near real time. Ukraine's Defense Industrial Revolution. Ukraine's Defense Industrial Revolution anchors this entire military ecosystem. Democracy's arsenal building the weapons of its own survival. State enterprises employ tens of thousands in hardened, dispersed facilities. Private companies design cutting-edge munitions and drones. Volunteer workshops supply parts and repairs. And engineering troops constantly adapt civilian equipment for military tasks. State factories rapidly scaled the Tu-22 Bohdana, pushing output from about 10 units a month toward 30 or more, cementing Ukraine as a leading wartime artillery manufacturer and delivering well over 150 modern howitzers by the mid-2020s. Drone factories and partner workshops push cumulative FPV production into the millions and long-range drone output into the tens of thousands, turning Ukraine into a global center for combat-proven unmanned technology. These industrial achievements show how quickly a country under attack can pivot to large-scale, high-tech arms production when survival demands it. Research and development, much of it classified, drives continuous innovation in artillery, drones, missiles, EW, and C4ISR, with combat feedback loops measured in weeks rather than years. Distributed logistics systems move huge quantities of ammunition and material under fire, concealed depots, hardened rail hubs, and constantly repaired lines of communication deny Russia easy targets, while railway troops and engineers keep the network functioning despite relentless strikes. International partners feed this machine with key components, raw materials, and finished systems that Ukraine either integrates directly or reverse engineers for local production. International partnerships multiply Ukrainian capabilities exponentially. NATO and partner nation training missions have prepared hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian troops to Western standards, from basic infantry tactics to complex combined arms maneuvers and advanced staff work. The Ukraine Defense Contact Group, the Ramstein format, coordinates more than 50 countries, supplying everything from anti-tank weapons and artillery to air defense systems, armored vehicles, and F-16s. Allied training programs in the UK, Germany, Poland, the US, and elsewhere host Ukrainian recruits, officers, and technicians, while regional maintenance hubs in Europe keep donated systems combat-ready for the long term. International coalitions pledge continuing drone, missile, and ammunition supplies, and regional allies provide multi-year security and reconstruction packages. Meanwhile, institutions like the EU, US, IMF, and World Bank supply tens of billions of dollars in financial aid and credit lines that keep the wartime state functioning even as domestic revenues shrink under bombardment. Looking ahead, Ukraine faces evolving threats that demand constant adaptation. Russia's ongoing mobilization and war economy pivot sustained pressure along the front and enable large-scale missile and drone attacks against cities and infrastructure. Ammunition consumption for artillery, air defense, and drones stays extremely high, forcing Ukraine and its partners to expand production and manage stockpiles carefully to avoid gaps. Protecting critical infrastructure, including power grids, rail hubs, and ports, remains vital for civilian survival and military mobility. Defending extensive front lines stretches manpower and hardware across hundreds of kilometers, while maintaining a diverse roster of Soviet and Western equipment requires broad training, vast spare parts pipelines, and sophisticated logistics. Sustaining morale after years of attritional warfare tests, national resolve, even as Ukrainian leaders balance day-to-day defense with targeted offensives and deep strike campaigns designed to degrade Russia's capacity to wage war. To maintain effectiveness, Ukraine keeps pushing innovation boundaries. The Army of Drones program expands ambitious operator and software goals as domestic industry turns out increasingly advanced autonomous systems to hold targets at risk ever deeper inside Russian territory. Domestic missile programs, from repurposed anti-ship designs to new ground-launched cruise missiles, accelerate to give Ukraine more independent long-range options. AI integration enhances threat detection, automated target recognition, and decision support for air defense, artillery, and drone swarms, while new indigenous platforms, UAVs, UGVs, USVs, and ground systems move steadily toward greater self-sufficiency. Real constraints still limit these ambitions. Reconstruction costs already reach into the hundreds of billions of dollars, with many estimates placing long-term needs well above $400 billion, constraining how much Ukraine and its partners can invest simultaneously in war fighting and rebuilding. Demographics strain mobilization as casualties, displacement, and emigration shrink the available manpower pool. Industrial capacity works under constant missile and drone threat, and high-end components from advanced electronics to engines and composites still depend on international supply chains. Extended high-intensity combat wears down both equipment and people, forcing painful trade-offs between immediate operational needs and long-term force development. Those trade-offs define Ukraine's strategic planning every single day. In conclusion, Ukraine's military in 2026 represents a remarkable fusion of necessity and innovation. Combat-driven transformation, a defense effort that consumes a historic share of national output, and unprecedented international partnerships combine to create a military that can resist a much larger, nuclear-armed adversary. Battle-tested forces, protected by layered air and missile defenses, and empowered by rapid technological adaptation, stand ready to defend sovereignty with unbroken determination. The integration of Western systems, indigenous ingenuity, and massive civilian contributions creates asymmetric advantages, proving that a nation can compress decades of evolution into just a few years of war. As challenges persist, Ukraine's military continues to evolve through constant combat, operational experimentation, and the fundamental understanding that freedom demands sacrifice. So the next time you think of military transformation, remember, there's more to Ukraine's force than Western weapons and brave soldiers. There is a military that has condensed generations of learning into the crucible of war, proving that innovation, determination, and democratic values can resist tyranny even against overwhelming odds, where courage becomes destiny's architect.